Hello, my name is David Plyler, and I'm in the music division at the Library of Congress. And I am very pleased to be here with composer Brigitte Muntendorf and pianist Ning Yu to talk about Brigitte's piece Trilogy that's going to be performed at the Library of Congress on May 31st. So thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, we're so pleased to have a chance to talk to you because this concert is part of a series that we're calling Peace Offerings, where we're trying to take a kind of a deep dive into a single work mostly, and of about 30 to 45 minutes. And so this piece kind of fit perfectly into that time frame. And so it's great to be able to talk with you and learn a bit more about how the piece came together and what's involved in the piece, and especially to get the performer's perspective as well. So thank you both for being here. I guess the first thing I'd like to start talking about is just to get a little bit of a background about how this piece was first developed. My understanding is that you began the work in 2014 or wrote it in 2014, but it was a single movement at that time. Maybe you could just tell us how this piece developed, Brigitte.
Yeah, so actually I got a scholarship in 2014 for the SWR Experimental Studio in the south of Germany. So it's a studio connected to the broadcast, and they since many years they develop pieces with technologies and composers like Mantra from Stockhausen they did, or Prometeo from Nono, or Boulez pieces. And I had the chance to work there for 2 weeks, so I started to develop actually this piece. Key of Presence is the first movement for piano and live electronics. And I was there just 2 weeks in the space, working with their Max patch and the patch they developed to create different sounds, and was just working on sound qualities that I like to choose for this piece. And after this, I went home and developed this first movement. But I was not aware at this time that there will 2 movements follow. So it was it came actually about 2 years later. I wrote the third movement. And then I thought, okay, it's a piece consisting of 2 pieces, which can be played together. And then I decided to write the second movement. And so the trilogy. It took actually like about five years. So to write it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's so dense and so you have so much going on. I guess one of the first questions that I have about the first movement, maybe just to start there, is the dramatic opening and the use of contact microphones on the body. And I was wondering, was that something that came up as you were developing the piece, or was that an integral part of the concept of the piece before you kind of embarked on it? Or how did you get from to kind of have this component be such a prominent part of that movement?
So actually, this was the movement this year with which I started everything. So and I tried out some things at home, and then I went to the studio to work on this. But the main idea was for the first movement to create a kind of an apparatus, where you say that the pianist and the piano itself, that they are melting into each other. So normally the pianists are playing this instrument, and I always felt that there is asked myself, how could this connection be stronger? So these mics, contact microphones on the body. So this is how the piece starts. It starts with the person, with the individual. And then there are also contact mics in the piano or another pedal, like the fourth pedal. It's like a manipulation of the body or an amplification and the piano at the same time. To ask also this question, how much interpretation is possible, how much triggering is involved. So what is the role actually, and how to distinguish these 2 entities, let's say.
By triggering, you mean like the pianist triggering electronic components, or is that what you mean by that?
Mm-hmm. When they're hitting on the chest, they are triggering sounds, but they're also triggering electronics when they play special keys. Mm-hmm. Or the pedal that is on the floor, so another pedal. And then, but they're also hitting inside the piano, playing inside. So it's like a very percussive movement, the first one.
Mhm.
Um,
It seems
yeah.
it seems like, I mean, it's almost like an Ur instrument where you have this big instrument where the like you said, the pianist is kind of part of this apparatus. And I'm wondering, Ning, if you could say a few things about how it's almost like you're being treated like a percussionist is often treated, where you have to take on all the extra instruments, the kind of the weird things that you might not normally encounter. Like, how was that for you? I mean, of course, you played tons of new music in your history, but how was it kind of dealing with this aspect of the piece, or coordinating between the physicality of the body component plus the pianistic?
Yeah, so I just want to say that the first time I heard this piece, with that first sound, I was so struck that I had goosebumps on my body because of that. It's not just the sound, but also like just seeing the pianists hitting themselves in unison. It was really strong, made a really strong impression for me. So when Corey and I started rehearsing this piece, we hit ourselves so many times because we discussed, oh, is it on the side? Is it on the heart? Is it in the middle? Before we knew it was like in the middle, sort of really like how do you call this? Like eye kind of a bit of a eye of the chest kind of area,
Mm.
and what kind of shirt we're wearing, how is that going to affect the sound? Do we hit really loudly? Do we, um is it how far is our hand? We talked so much about this first hit. Of course, this hit happens quite a few times during the piece, and then somehow it slowly disappears in the texture of the piece. It slowly becomes part of the canvas of the sound once we get into the piece. But that first couple of strokes is just, I know how stunning it is, also from the audience perspective, because people just tell me like, wow, that was so unexpected. The first sound that you do on stage that comes from you. So I think Corey and I, talked about like how far we pick up our hands, and then how does that look visually, um, and also like how that interact with the sound itself, and also when do we peel it off of our chest and then hit again. So those are all things that we talked about in terms of like interpretation.
How
Yeah.
did you notate that, Brigitte? Just
I just noted the duration of let's say, the duration of this movement, the duration of when it goes back. But as Ning says, there are so many things actually that you cannot notate, that the exact position, the way I don't know, it also looks very differently depending on who is doing this. No? And there are also other gestures I love to change actually for every person that is playing this piece, because some gestures are more natural to someone and others are not. And yeah.
And
that's
David, can I add
oh, yeah,
another sound that's
please.
very within the first 30 seconds or so, besides hitting of the chest, is also stomping on another pedal. It's basically with contact mic inside of a wooden box. We also chatted so much about that. Just like how tall the box is going to be. Then we realize if the box is just slightly too tall, it becomes really uncomfortable for us to get to it, and how hard we stomp. Corey is not wearing shoes when he stomps on the box, but I have to wear shoes. So these are all like, details that, we enjoyed working out, actually.
Well, I imagine you had to work it out several times, because I'm imagining when you first were learning the piece, you did not have the electronics set, right? Or did you start
That's
with?
right.
So you had to kind of get that experience of coordination with one set of audible feedback, but then you had to redo it a bit with when you brought Levy into the mix. Was that a difficult transition, or was it something that felt natural at that point?
Luckily, our actual like full tech rehearsal was at MPAC. This is 2024 in August, and we were all there for a week, and we had so much wonderful gear that were used by just amazing musicians and engineers. So I think the transition was rather smooth, and everybody could come together, use our ears to fine tune that sound. And Brigitte was there the whole time with us.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah, so that made a lot of sense. It was a
Yeah,
great
and
experience.
then you had that wonderful video through Time Spans. That did that come out of that? Was that after that experience?
Yes, like it worked out so well. So we were at Unpack, invited by Amadeus, and we were there for a week, and then we had 1 day of break, and then we played the piece. So perfect.
Nice. No, that's wonderful. Well, I'm wondering, Brigitte, if you could say a bit more about, I mean, because I agree that opening is so striking, but also there's something about the title that the key of presence that also kind of makes you start to ask questions of yourself about what that means. I'm wondering if you could say a bit more about that, because I know that you sort of have the bookcase or bookend versions of key of presence and key of absence on the outer movements, but maybe you could speak a little bit about that. I had some theories that came into my mind as I was listening, but I really would love to hear what you.
I think these topics of presence and absence are following me, or I'm following them, and they appear so often. I don't know. When I wrote this piece, I always had this idea that right now I'm writing this piece, but then a lot of things came to my mind, and I start to include them in the piece. So that's also why in all three parts there are quotations. There are quotations from songs, from scenes, from I don't know, things which had played a role once in my life, which just came through. And then there's also this other aspect that I thought, if I have these two pianists playing this piece, which is quite demanding in terms of coordination and also playing together and doing all the extra things. So how present can they be, actually? How present can they be for the audience, or are they, disappearing in this kind of work they are doing? So they are working so hard on the stage. And I had the feeling also when I was then observing the rehearsals from far away, as if you are from the bird's perspective, sitting on a hill, looking at these musicians. And I don't know how you feel about it, but when I see people that are hardworking in the sense of, I don't know, the time in the concert between pieces, things have to be brought from A to B, a stage manager come on stage, they change. I really love these moments because it brings me at least very close to myself, thinking about what do I see, where am I right now? And somehow I felt I had this idea or this wish that if to explore what is happening when these two people are so involved, and at the same time you are, I don't know, you have speakers around you, you are somewhat in an immersive setting, but you cannot distinguish what is real or what is live electronic, what is tape, what is played live on the piano. So there is this confusion between being immersed, let's say, in sound, and then this very far away image of these two persons working so hard also with each other, as if they would disappear in this kind of sound world.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost like this. It almost feels like again, not that how can I say this? There's a sort of mechanical sort of thing that starts. It feels like it starts to happen that the pianists are a part of. Maybe this is the apparatus that you were talking about earlier, where that sense of self seems to be lost for a bit. It does become a bit like confusing in a pleasant way, in a I want to figure out what's going on sort of a way, at least for me as a listener, as I'm trying to figure out how these things are being accomplished. And it was it was lovely to see the top down view as well, to see how these types of things were being produced inside the piano as well. And but yeah, that's fascinating. Ning, could you say a little bit more about how it felt for you, what your sense of presence was if while playing it?
Okay, so I'm going to probably say something that Brigitte will maybe disagree. So this is like my view. So when I saw the title of the piece, I was like, oh, this is a piece about in the moment. So like a presence, like now instead of a presence, like I'm being here, but it's really about this moment in time. And then I started thinking about like the last one, key of absence. So absence, like to me felt like the past. Like I have been here, but now I'm looking sort of past through myself in the past. And then Christ Increase for me had this like really futuristic feeling to it, that's in the middle of the movement. So I've always thought to myself like I am now, I'm in the future, I'm in the past. This is how I felt like as a performer. And another really striking elements of I want to mention, I don't want to give everything away, but is the phrase from the poem that something's coming, my friend, from the first one. I'm always thinking like I am now and I'm looking into the future, kind of like something's happening, like what is happening, but I'm now, I don't know what is coming. So this is sort of a sort of dramatic theatrical sense that I've always sort of embedded in myself when I play the piece.
What was the source of that text? What was the source of that text, Brigitte? Of that?
It is actually a friend of mine. He's a writer, a Spanish writer, and he used to write very experimental books, and then I think he's still writing, but then he switched into being a yoga teacher, and he spent a lot of time working very hard on this. On the yoga philosophy, let's say, in its whole. And he was writing every day a poem on Facebook. And he wrote it in English, even though he didn't speak English very well. And I really loved this imperfection and this, okay, I write this now today, so there is nothing in it what we can call genius, or it's just an everyday moment, like a glimpse of a thought. And yeah, I really appreciated this, and I asked him actually to speak this poem, and recorded it, and then it's part of the tape part.
Wonderful. I mean, I also like the juxtaposition of modern day kind of maybe almost extemporaneous type of poem next to you. I mean, you have Goethe referenced, right, with your Wolf setting and things like that. So you have you're kind of hitting across the centuries here in terms of the types of things that may or may not be come through obviously to somebody. Like I didn't know what the source of that the first text was just from hearing it, but it was of course incredibly striking too, and ominous in a sense. At least that I had a certain sense of concern about what is coming and that's one might. But, one maybe before we hit the middle movement, I going back to what you were both saying about presence and absence. I'm wondering if there were some other things going on, especially in the absence movement, with the visual elements that we're playing with. What we see is not what we hear, or where. So, for instance, one of the things that I noticed was you'd have a piano attack, and then as they would lift off of the key, you'd hear another attack from the other piano and things like that. And so it made me think that they were filling each other's spaces in some sort of a way, and that absence. And I don't know if you had any, if that's just something that happened, that's just a happenstance sort of a thing, or if there were elements like that where the two of them, because in that third movement, the two of them become in some ways more individual, like they're talking to each other, about what's happening. I love that they're having this discussion, about the tempo and about things that are, and they're speaking each other's names. But yeah, I'm just curious if you could say a bit more about that, because it's such a fascinating, different kind of dynamic than it was in the first movement.
Mhm. It's so hard to say. So somehow I started actually only with this first interval. This when they both play this third, but do the theme,
Right.
and which sounds so nice. This third, this
Yeah.
major third. So and then. And I just thought about the space that it opens, no? And then you hear a voice that is saying, this, as if you just open a space, but then somebody closed it directly, So with this, what is going on here? So it's quite abstract, I would say, but it's definitely a try of these two pianists, which are somehow catched in this machine. So Key of Presence is one machine which is made through virtuosity and through acting, and Cries Increase is actually the machine that is outsourced. So we have a voice that is talking to them, and then in Key of Absence they are suddenly talking with each other, but not really, Actually, so they are looking, one is looking to the other, but the other is looking to the audience, and and they are talking. Somehow they communicate a little bit like this, but still somehow sharing one space, but not really being connected. No.
It also seems like there's some sort of like permutational thing happening with the words that they're saying, where the order becomes less than understandable, or at least less logical, or less more nonsensical in some ways. And that, I don't know, it feels like that is what's happening, and that so that the communication is perhaps lost a bit. But yeah, at the same time, they also seem to be connected to each other and clearly tuned into what they're doing, because they're managing to stay together and everything. It's a bit, I imagine, what is that, a sort of is there any a bit of mental gymnastics there, Ning, that you have to do I just imagine that might be difficult to do.
Actually, this is the first time I think that the words that Corey and I are speaking in our version of this piece in English. Is that correct? Brigitte?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So we were working on the translation of the text. And I think Brigitte first gave me a translation from a friend who's an English speaker, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And I basically sent it back and asking, it's like, are you sure this person is English speaking? It doesn't make any sense to me. and she said, oh, no, it's like this. And so then my husband's side of family is German. So I give my husband to read. I was like, oh, can you take a look at this? Do you think those two match in the feel, in the sort of the sense it's projecting to the audience? He's like, yes, absolutely. I was like, oh, okay, so it's supposed to be like this. But as the audience will see, that the words are spoken, something I wish it sounded like, it will never sound again. And it just takes everyone a moment to stop and think about what was just said. Then Corey will speak a slightly different version than that. And then you have the just like moments of, the music is happening so fast, yet, in that it's like almost like a pause button on the time when that section of the music happens. And also I has several people like telling me how striking the moment is when we turn to the audience and wave to them and then say those words to them. And like, it's so shocking. It's almost like a wall has been broken, and all of a sudden they are engaged, and then they feel like they have to really understand those words to be able to understand the music, if you know what I mean.
That's so interesting. I think that I don't want to say too much just because there's a lot to. I mean, one can hear this piece and see this piece many times and continue to get a lot out of it. But there's certain things that are, best kind of experienced in the moment. I think. But
Yes.
yeah, just to, but it's fascinating to hear you speak about that process of um, kind of coming to terms with what you have to do, and then the audience reaction to it, and that you had the similar reaction that the audience does when first kind of encountering these
Yeah.
materials. So that's wonderful. I'm wondering if we could look back at the center movement, because Christ Increase, and this maybe I believe that you had mentioned somewhere that you had some inspiration from a Zimmermann work, the Stille und Umkehr, and which is a wonderful piece, and it was interesting to kind of think about this movement while thinking about that one, because it wasn't the relationship wasn't one of quotation. At least I don't think it was, unless there was an element of that, but more one of maybe you could just speak about that. I'd love to hear what you how that movement came into being.
So actually, this piece of Zimmermann, Stille und Umkehr, I don't know in English, it's maybe Silence and Reverse. It was the first piece of contemporary music, of new music, which I really fell in love with. So it was the last piece that he wrote before he committed suicide, and which is quite tragic because he's a composer. I wouldn't say that I have any role models, but he is one where I think he was really ahead of his time. And I don't know, in this piece, it is somehow circling around itself, but there is also a lot of quite a piece inside of this piece. We have these a little bit of blues rhythm of the snare drum, and then always these, I don't know, these flute motives, which are, I don't know, like clouds, and somehow it felt very peaceful. And I transformed actually this piece, or a recording of this piece, and pitched it very deep, very deep down, so as if it would lie under the whole second movement. There is this Zimmermann, which is, I don't know, it felt very natural because it was quite in my mind, this piece, and to put it under everything that is happening somehow above. And what is one idea was also to think the two pianists as a complementary entities. So they have to play rhythms together, but actually it's just one written rhythm which is distributed to two pianos, and that means that it needs to be played perfectly together, so to reach the same dynamic, the same articulation, always totally in time. And this was really stunning to hear with Ning and Corey playing this. So it was really great.
Ning, how was that? What was that like to coordinate with Corey? Was it something that came naturally?
Yeah. Oh, that's another piece with, mostly, I think, action-wise, like theatrical element of the piece that we talked so much about. Just where exactly are we rubbing the side of the chair, because that's what we do for quite a bit of the first part of the piece, because we have this sound, but on the bench, where do we do it? Do we stop exactly at the same time, pick up our hand? This is like very like micromanaging we were about the piece, and also just listening to each other back and forth, and rehearse a ton about the sort of the precision through that sort of ping-ponging back and forth between the two of us. And also we also talk in this piece, and we were also saying it felt like we're secret agents.
Yes.
In a spaceship. We have to be really are you there? So there's something very controlled and very managed and very ritualistic about this middle piece versus the last piece. It becomes like a kind of volcanic playing between the two of us, and then it was just like trying to catch, and there's a lot feeling like huffing and puffing, in terms of the piano playing. Just, it's really challenging, but this one is so meditated in the middle movement, so accurate, and we fuss a lot about our pitch being exactly matching, because it's being prepared, that they have to be really, really sounding like one piano. So that part is fun. And I'm always having this imagination. I even wanted to do that with the lighting. I'm sort of trapped on a spaceship with my partner, and then the only way we can communicate is like sort of walkie-talkie on our wrist. And then we have to do like certain ritualistic movements, like hair and then rubbing the all these are as signals. So that's just my own imagination.
Yeah, especially these movements, I like to work on them a lot. Sometimes it fits, if you do this, and with some it looks weird because people don't do this. Some are doing it, some are not doing it, or going through the hair, or going, I don't know. It's these are all movements like as if you make yourself ready for something that might come. No, it's also this movement in the beginning on the piano stool. As if you are waiting for something. So it's kind of waiting. But how do you see then the last part, Ning? Because in the last part, it's so you are playing with these very little tiny pianos.
Yeah. I was just talking about that with Chris Otto, whom I'm playing, phenomenal violinist and composer. So we're working together on two pieces. One of them is his. So we're just talking about the sense of how do we play if like children? How do we play like someone who has never touched the keyboard or the instrument? And he was working on something by John Zorn that he needs to play like a child who's not very comfortable or completely seeing the instrument as like a virtuosic instrument from like a mastered eyes. So I was talking to him about this moment of getting the keyboard, because your instruction is you just discovered this instrument and you put it on your lap. You're trying to, like try out a few notes and kind of see what happens when you touch it. Somehow that was difficult, just because it's kind of coming from a very different eye. So I think the key for me, at least, was always not knowing what sound that key I'm touching is going to sound like, and then that sort of is the novelty of the moment to touch a key. I was like, okay, to truly experience, okay, I heard that, oh, okay, if I touch that, oh, it's that key. So yeah. And that's like the last several minutes of the middle piece.
Let me ask another question about that central movement. There's a simultaneous element of like absolute control. Like I feel like that everything is being controlled, but then there's elements of I would almost describe them as fragile or things where there's it feels like the things could break apart at any moment, and some of those are kind of created by it's some of the motions that the pianists are doing. And there's one that was particularly moving to me, that had to do with the keyboard, the split keyboard moment. That was just this very powerful moment, and so I'm wondering how much variability you mentioned earlier that there's some leeway in terms of what motions are natural for the particular performers, but are some of those just always components of it? Or I don't know exactly where I'm going with this question, except that it struck me that there's this nice tension there that was between these things that were the things that you see more than you hear, but you kind of think that you're hearing something, and it's not clear, to me, which is again a good sense of unrest or unease, maybe.
Yes, somehow. I mean, I must say that also for me, while composing it, I didn't want like one layer to be the one that is giving commands to the other, right? So we have this tape, and then we have this voice, which is saying, "Put your hands on the keys. Put your hands. Do this and that." But then there are moments when the pianists react on it, or they don't react on it, and then suddenly the voice starts like, "Please accompaniment." No? So maybe this voice is asking for something or needs something from the pianist, but they refuse. So suddenly you're not sure who's controlling whom, no? And what are the dynamics between these? What is this control actually? Where is it coming from? And then in the end, when they take these little pianos, so somehow it is as if you escape this kind of system, but then they are playing the piano, so they are playing the voice which has spoken before. But you don't have the feeling that now they are controlling the voice. It's more like, okay, but they start with a kind of curiosity, like children, exploring things, and then this voice appears. So somehow this whole dialectic between this who is controlled by whom is it's dissolved in the air somehow. It's not really clear. So it's but it's still, you still have the feeling that there is this machine, no? Maybe because of the Zimmermann that is, in the dark going and having these circles. Yeah, I know for me this is also, I don't know if it is a dark movement. It feels like I think it's quite interesting, Ning, that you say it's like the spaceship. Maybe there's a connection between these two.
Well, it's a beautiful ambiguity in any case. Like I really love the way that the theatrical components, I should say, I don't mean that in a way that's diminishing the importance of the movements, but rather just the way that the visual and the audio interact throughout the piece are really, I think, a fascinating element that it's a great pleasure to be able to watch and hear. I guess my last question would be, this is a piece you finished, I think, 5 or so years ago. Is this? Do you have anything else that you'd like to say, or that you'd like for? This may be the first. I don't know if our audience has heard much of your music before. This may be their first encounter with it. Is there anything else you'd like to say about this piece or your work? That anything at all? I'm curious.
And I have the feeling that this piece is a kind of a nucleus of my work. So this is also why I love this piece so much. It feels like because it really breaks these boundaries between between a concert piece, but then it could also be like a audio play, maybe. It could be it has these theatrical moments. So it's difficult to say what is this actually, because and it was the first time where I concentrated this thinking of references, not only between material, but also between movements, or what we just talked about, about this question of control, how to break it, how to deal with it, and how to bring it into music. So yeah, it feels for me also like a very important work. So
absolutely. Ning, do you have any other thoughts on this piece or the experience?
I think the only other thing that it might be shown during the concert would be the sound, how the piano is making the sound, and that could be something if the audience happen to be at the live performance on the 31st, they can see it for themselves. But I just want to say that the piano itself, I mean, it's such a pianistic piece. I mean, Brigitte has done a amazing job have this piece feel really very much in the hands, even like different gestures connected always feel very natural to me, you know, from the hitting and to the stomping in the first movement, and also the third movement. I mentioned how challenging it is, but also still very much within the sort of great logistics of the hands. But the audience actually don't hear the piano like pure piano, so somehow it's very, that element of the piano sound is very connected to the live electronics and also the tape part. I think the sort of modification of the piano sound really connected these three spheres of the sound on stage. So, you know, I use a ping pong, for example, but you know, like a really gentle bounce on a surface on the piano, and Corey uses mallet, and you know, there's various subtle things, perhaps not immediately obvious to the audience. So that's something I just wanted to mention.
Those are great points, especially I love that you bring up the pianistic choreography too, because I noticed that too, that it seemed very natural the way you would move between doing those different acts that are maybe not a typical pianist in the pianist repertoire of things that they're asked to do all the time.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, some composers who ask you to, you know, do gymnastics and, you know, slap the side of the piano.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to, you know, manage, but it feels like this. It feels like you're drawn into that. You're part of the piano very much in the way the writing. So
Yes.
that's really, really cool the way that works out. And
Yeah, I must say that the first movement, it made me very tired always working on this. So I never slept so much, really, because I was working on this, and like I managed to write like 6 or 8 measures a day. It was especially for the first part of this first movement.
Mhm.
So because of the coordination and to think about it, so it was quite challenging. Also. But of course, important for me also to try it by myself.
Right.
So I'm a pianist from I studied piano as well next to composition, so it's my instrument. But this was it was quite challenging. But I'm very happy that you say it feels organic.
Yes.
Well, absolutely. Well, on that note, I think I can just say that I'm excited to hear the piece live, and I'm so pleased that both of you could join me today and speak about your work, Brigitte, and about playing that piece, Ning. And I appreciate you both so much and your work, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, David. I'm also looking very much forward.